Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. So we've had our break for the Super Bowl. I hope your team won, or if it didn't, it was certainly an exciting game. So now it's time to get back to work for astrophotography. Well, it's not actually work. This is actually fun. And normally we have Alex hosting, but Alex is in, where is he? He's in Antarctica or Guatemala, or I don't know where. He's kind of listening in on it in case I make any mistakes. He can correct me. But he is someplace where his reception isn't that good, so he's just going to be watching tonight. Hi, Alex. We also have him muted, so we don't hear what's going on in Antarctica or wherever he is. I'm not sure. In any case, tonight we have Jeff, I got to pronounce his name correctly, Prideaux, and he's going to tell us about robotic telescopes. And I would say there is none of us who have not been curious about these robotic telescopes. And wouldn't it be nice if kind of things happened all by themselves and we didn't have to go through all this processing stuff? And we're going to hear about it. And I know Jeff has a couple of these robotic telescopes, and he's going to tell us his experience with it and how they operate. And of course, you who are watching over on YouTube, please put in your questions with the normal question mark. We have somebody watching over there, and we will interrupt Jeff at appropriate moments and ask him his question. I know I have a few already. And I'm not going to go over the whole schedule as Alex normally does. Sorry, Alex. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but we're just going to move on. But one more thing before we hand it over to Jeff. Next week, be sure to show up because we have our processing of NGC 55. Also, I call it the Surfboard Galaxy, some data that Terry donated for us, which if you haven't processed it, it's probably too late to submit an image, but it's not too late to download the data from our website. And it's really a nice data set, and I would recommend anyone who hasn't done it, be sure to download it and give it a try. And we're going to have, I think Rory said 5 individuals who are going to come on and tell us their interpretation of this data. And I'm sure it's going to be very interesting and always something to learn about how somebody else processes data. And if there's nothing else, well, we lost Alex. I'm sure he'll be back. If there's nothing else, Jeff, we're going to turn it over to you and show us all about robotic telescopes.
Okay, thank you. Let me do my screen sharing. And this time I'll pick a screen. And go into slide mode.
You're good. Go for it.
You can close that little box in the corner.
Yes. Okay. First of all, my name is Jeff Prideaux. I'll tell you a little bit about myself so you know who is presenting. I grew up in an astronomy family. My father was an avid amateur telescope maker, and my whole childhood I seem to remember him grinding mirrors. So he used to run workshops at our local astronomy club. This was back in the 1970s on how to make telescopes from scratch, grinding mirrors. And I got caught up in that orbit a little bit, and as a youth, ground a couple of mirrors myself and entered telescopes at Stellafane up in Vermont a couple of years, and I won a couple of prizes. So that was in my youth, and then I took a long hiatus from astronomy, just living my life, doing other stuff. And then about 5 years ago, I got back into it. I was looking for something different to do and remembered all that fun I had as a youth doing that. And I was basically a visual astronomer when I first got back into it, with a bunch of binoculars and some small refractors and a couple other things. And of course, as everybody knows, if you live in a semi-urban or suburban location, you're a little bit limited what you can see visually, especially for deep sky objects. So I started following the electronic assisted astronomy forums on cloudy nights and learned all about that mode of astronomy, where you could do some short subduration stacking and actually see the image better. And about that time, some of these new telescopes, these smart scopes, what I'm calling robotic telescopes, which you see in this slide, like the EvScope was just starting to come out with their Kickstarter program, and the Stellina was already out. And I was researching those, and I was interested, but I was a little hesitant to jump into it. And I think I must have just been kind of sitting on the sidelines for about a year. Then finally the Vespera came out, and its Kickstarter price was only about $1,000. So I said, well, I might as well jump in on that and, just get it. But then it was a long wait. I think I didn't get it until like 2 years later. And actually did get it about maybe 5 months ago. So I've had the Vespera for about 5 months. And this little Dwarflab, that thing kind of in the bottom middle, this is a new release, a Chinese company, and I also got that, and I got that in my hands about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so those are the two that I have personal experience with, but in my research for it, I know quite a bit about the Stellina and the EvScope. So we'll be covering that as well. So this talk is going to kind of describe what are these robotic telescopes, what can they do, show some imaging examples, and also show what they're not good for, and kind of what kind of people they might be a good fit for. And so these scopes, these robotic scopes, they're commercial all-in-one systems, that system telescopes that are designed for ease of use. So that's their main thing, is they're designed to be easy to use. Somebody could actually, who's never done astronomy before, could buy one of these scopes, take it out of the box, spend a little time making sure the firmware is updated, the battery charged up, and take it out, and you could get your first deep sky image that same night. That is, I know a lot of people in astronomy who struggle a long time taking photographs, so it's kind of amazing that there's some product that you can actually have success, the first night you use it. And these scopes, they have an integrated scope, mount, tripod, and software. And so that's good and bad, and I will talk about that. But these scopes are predominantly for electronic assisted astronomy, or what I kind of call casual astro imaging. They're not really for more sophisticated or advanced astro imaging, though. And these scopes, they have certain things in common. They're all easy to set up. They have auto alignment. They have an internal catalog of objects, but you can also usually enter in the manual coordinates for stuff that's not in the catalog, or comets is another example. And some of them do autofocus, some don't. And I think all of them do auto go-to with plate solving, and they auto stack. And some of them can save the raw files, meaning the raw single sub-exposures. So some of them make those available where you could take those and run them through your own third-party software if you want. And some of them have the ability to pre-set up a bunch of different targets and just have the thing run all night long while you're sleeping, going from target A to target B and target C, and take pictures of each one. And some of them can do mosaics, where you can capture a larger field of view than the native field of view, and it'll automatically keep repositioning it and taking new images, and then automatically stitch those images together. So the telescope, some of them can do that automatically. And these are all controlled through apps on mobile devices. And this is the current crop of telescopes that I'm aware of right now. The one at the top is by a French company, Unistellar, and they have 4 different similar products that all have about the same form factor. All the EvScope Equinox, or EvScope II Equinox 2. And the difference is the Equinox versions don't have an electronic viewfinder or eyepiece, and the EvScope versions do. And of course, on all of these, you can look at the object on your connected mobile device, be be a smartphone or a tablet. And the EvScope II and Equinox II have a larger sensor and probably a little bit better internal processing. So it is more expensive. So the EvScope II and Equinox II are more expensive. The second row down is another French company. I'm not sure if I pronounce it right, Vaonis, and they have the Stellina and the Vespera are the two things that they sell. They have one higher end scope, but I don't think they produce that with enough numbers to even, and it's so expensive, I'm not even going to talk about it here. But for these two, their Stellina was their first model, and the Vespera is their subsequent one they came out with about a year ago. The third row down is Dwarflabs. That is a new company, or a new company offering one from China. And this company had a predecessor to this called the Dwarf, but that was not for astrophotography. It was just for daytime terrestrial viewing. So this company does have experience producing a product. So this is their second one. And I think they might have also done this tiny microscope product too, but I'm not sure. But I know a lot of people were kind of excited about this since it was their second product. It was less of a gamble to jump on one of these Kickstarters if they have already done something. And I will have subsequent slides that go into each of these in a little bit more detail. The one on the bottom is, this is not actually out yet. It's not actually being shipped, but there is a Kickstarter program, and it's another one from China. They got a Hong Kong, maybe Miroski. And this, I think they're trying to fill a little gap that all the others were just dedicated deep sky object scopes. But this one, you can tell by looking at it, it's a little Maxitov for the main scope. And then this other one is a little 50 millimeter finder. And they have some system where you can swap the sensor between the two. So you can maybe use the bigger scope to look at planets and the moon, maybe, and the little one is maybe the finder. Maybe that helps you do the go-to, but you can also, for any deep sky imaging, you would just be using the little scope. And the EvScope, all the different versions, they all have the same basic layout. It's basically a Newtonian design where the light comes in, bounces off a paraboloid mirror, and instead of where the diagonal would normally go, they have the sensor there, and so it focuses there. And of course, the sensor is held in place by a spider, and that spider is also providing power and the USB cable to the sensor, and that gets routed back to the computer, which is in the fork arm. And of course, then for the models that do have the electronic viewfinder, they have wires that go to that to provide the signal. And of course, since it's just an electronic viewfinder, they can position it anywhere on the scope they wanted, and they just chose to put it there because it's, I guess, a little more stable there. And one other thing I wanted to mention about this scope is it does take filters. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see the spider, and there's enough room there to put your fingers in there, and you could, it's a little awkward, but you could hold a filter, an 1.25 inch filter, and screw it in on the inside to, in the light path to, you could add your nebula filter there. I'm not sure if you could do a solar filter in there or not. I guess there's no reason why you couldn't, but I don't know that for a fact, but I know definitely people do put nebula filters in there. And again, the different versions of the EvScope, some of them come with a bigger, more expensive sensor, and some of them come with a smaller sensor, and some with the eyepiece and some without the eyepiece. Now the Stellina, this is 80 millimeter f5 doublet refractor, and it is one little quirk in this design. As you can see on the picture on the left, It has the typical refractor lenses, and then it has a flat mirror that bounces the light over into one of the fork arms, and that's where the sensor is. And I think they did this to make that center tube a little shorter so that they could have a shorter overall system, because they wanted it to be able to close and go into a home position, and that just allowed the whole thing to be a little bit smaller. But it is a little bit unusual to see a refractor with a flat mirror. And the I hope this animated GIF shows up, but this is a GIF off of the Vaonis product page, or maybe it's off of the Kickstarter page, but it shows the internals of the Vespera, and it's a 50 millimeter quadruplet. So that means it's kind of like that red cat design. There's 2 lenses up front and 2 in the back, so 4 in total. And so it gets pretty good image quality, for 50 millimeters. That shows what the Vespera looks like on the inside. And this is the Dwarf 2, another company product page showing the internals. And the interesting twist on this one is they use a prism. So the light comes in through a prism and bounces 90 degrees, and then it goes into the optical system. So you can see that breakout here. And I guess they did this just because they have this 2-lens system, kind of like a cell phone with a couple different lenses on it. They have the telephoto lens and the wide-angle lens. The wide-angle lens on the right in that photograph is just basically a viewfinder. It helps you find stuff. But the better sensor and everything is all associated with the telephoto lens. And one thing this scope can do that all the others can't is it can focus pretty close. All the others are limited to just around infinity focus. So you can use this one as a general purpose terrestrial scope too. So you can take pictures of birds or nature or whatever. I think I'd be able to focus as close as maybe 15, 20 feet away. I forget the exact number, but and you could take movies with it too. So this is I was a little excited to get this because I also like to do daytime nature photography, and this allows me to do that. And the other scopes I had, or the other were like a Vespera, that is only a astronomy scope. And this is that one that's not out yet. So we don't have any usage reports yet, but you can see here from this, just obviously it's a little Machitov F12, and you would not be using that F12 for deep sky objects with this low-end alt-az mount. You can, of course, use something like this for deep sky astrophotography, but you have to have a really, really good mount. And this isn't going to be it. So, but yeah, you could use this for planets, the moon, be probably fine. And the other little smaller scope is what you would be using for deep sky objects. And I'm not going to have too much to say about this because I don't know a whole lot about it, and we don't have any usage reports. So I don't know how fancy the software is. I'm guessing you put the camera on the little scope, and then you do the go-to and all that stuff, and maybe use that to automatically find the object. And then maybe you can look at the eyepiece with the other, and depending on what it is, maybe you can move the camera over and get a picture for certain types of things. But I just wanted to include this because it's coming out, but I'm not going to have too much more to say about this particular one. It might be neat, might not. We'll just have to wait and see. I think it's supposed to start shipping in March, so it's coming up next month for the Kickstarters. And this just summarizes all the apertures and focal lengths, and I added the cost. So the EvScope, you see that cost from $2,000 up to close to $5,000. So that's dependent on what version, whether you're getting the smaller, less expensive sensor or the more expensive one. And so there's a pretty big range there. The Stellina, the second one down, that's been pretty consistently $4,000 for, 3 or 4 years. The Vespera, it was about $1,000 for the Kickstarters to get the base unit. Then for a while it was $1,500 for the pre-orders. And then when they finally went retail, they bumped it up to $2,500. And last December, they did knock it down to $2,000 for a while, but then they, for the pre-Christmas sales, and then they bumped it back up. So we're hopeful that they might, do, little discounts here and there, maybe get it down to $2,000. But the standard retail for the Vespera is $2,500 now. The Dwarf 2, I have the little asterisk by the price because it is just the pre-sale price. So we can probably expect that to go up once it's actually being sold for retail. So right now, the EvScope, Stellina, and Vespera, you can find them all in online resellers. But the Dwarf 2, you can only get it now through pre-sales through the Dwarflabs company, but that will probably change before too long. And the one at the bottom, that $600 is the Kickstarter price, and you can expect that to also go up once it goes into pre-sale and retail. And this shows what sensor each of these use. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but it's here if people want to come back to it and look at it. And you can see what the field of view is on the right, about what these scopes can deliver. Remember, the EvScope has different versions have 2 different size filters. The more expensive one is that 347 filter, a little bit bigger. And the less expensive one uses that 224, which is a pretty common planetary camera that a lot of people might already be using. And so in parentheses is the information for that smaller sensor for that top one. And on the very bottom one, there's 2 different scopes in play there. So it's the same sensor, but you can put it on one scope or the other. And so that's why the field of view for the one on the bottom, I have 2 different fields of view. And all of these have alt-az mounts. They all do short exposure EAA. So none of these are going to be doing any long exposures, like 5-minute exposures. They're all going to be like in the order of 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds max, probably. And then you take those and you stack them, and you can go as long as you want. Of course, since they're alt-az, if you did stack something for 4 or 5 hours, the software can stack them, but with the field curvature, you're going to be losing all the corners and stuff. Except for the Stellina. The Stellina has a built-in field derotator, so the sensor is slowly rotating as it's being used. Now, I don't think that field derotation is good enough to allow the Stellina to take longer sub-exposures, but if you did go for like 4 or 5 hours, you would basically be able to have the same field of view without it being compromised with the corners all chopped off. So it'd be a little subtle adjustments for the stacking, but it won't be a dramatic rotating the image a lot. So that's one advantage the Stellina has. Of course, that's part of the $4,000 price tag it has, because it has that built in and a few other bells and whistles. And I know this Stellina and Vespera have autofocus, which is a really nice feature. The EvScope, you have to manually focus it yourself, and I think they provide a Bartonov mask. Although the users say it's not that big a deal, they get used to that focusing step pretty quick. But I can say from personal experience, if you have the Stellina or the Vespera and have the autofocus, you really like it, because it does a pretty good job. The Dwarf 2 does not currently have an autofocus that works in the Astro mode. They do have one that works in the daytime for terrestrial stuff, and they say they're working on it to get the astrophotography autofocus to work. So that will be a nice feature. Right now, I have to fiddle a lot to get the stars in focus on my Dwarf 2. So that is a little bit of a pain, but so I'm looking forward to them having that working. And some of these, I know the Vespera and the Stellina and the Dwarf 2, I know they can save the sub exposures in a raw format. So you can run them through your own third-party processing suite. I'm not sure about the EvScope if they save something in raw format, so I don't want to say for sure in one way or the other. And the Dwarf 2 can be used in the daytime and also for nature photography and videos. And one of the selling points of these types of scopes is their portability, and each of these companies has some kind of backpack or case feature where you could put the whole thing. This is the optical tube, mount, tripod, everything. You know, it just all goes like in a backpack or some kind of case. And so you can see that W column is the weight. So you see the EvScope. See, a lot of these are around 20 pounds, a little more, but the Vespera is down only around 11 pounds. That's quite a bit lighter. You can see the kind of on that same row as the Vespera, the kind of gray backpack. And that orange thing this is my picture of, I bought that at a little local tool company called Harbor Freight. They sell these little pluckable cases where you can pluck out the foam or however you want. So I bought one of those, and it fit the Vespera just right. So that's another option to get one of those cases where some people get those things for eyepieces. I have one. I put my eyepieces in it and other astronomy gear. And so the whole thing fits in that. You know, you could just take the whole thing somewhere. The Dwarf 2 is really tiny. The whole scope and everything weighs just 3.3 pounds, and it fits in a little camera bag that they provide. I actually have a mirrorless camera, and I bought a camera bag for my mirrorless camera and have enough room in it to put a zoom lens and a couple other little things. And that bag is bigger than the Dwarf 2 bag. So that just shows how small the Dwarf 2 is. And this Miroski, they have in the product Kickstarter video, they do show it in a case. I don't know if that's something they're going to provide or whether they just show that it is possible to put the whole thing in some kind of suitcase-like thing. And even though these are system scopes and you can't swap stuff out, you're kind of stuck with what they have. There are a number of accessories that the different models have. This is the Vespera accessories that are possible to get. I won't go into too much, but it has like a dual band filter you could get, a general light pollution filter you could get, a solar filter, get a little bit better tripod. You could, this little thing in the very center is this little humidity temperature sensor thing that the Vespera actually has a built-in dew heater, but they have it, you need to buy those little extra part to activate it. So that's a little sneaky that they did. But and then the Stellina, for example, has a built-in dew heater, but you get that as part of the price of getting the whole thing. And backpacks and some other odds and ends. And what are these kind of scopes good for? I would call these good for EAA. That's that mode of astronomy called electrical assisted astronomy. People who do that are not necessarily into astrophotography, but they just want to take advantage of short exposure stacking to be able to see nebula. And so definitely people who are interested in that kind of astronomy, these would be good for. And they're also good. There's a lot of people who use these scopes for kind of for more casual astrophotography. You know, they're kind of like you're staying in the shallow end of the pool. You're not doing anything too fancy or too sophisticated. And these scopes work pretty well for the larger targets, you know, the larger Messier objects, you know, kind of large to medium objects. Once you start getting to really small objects, due to the small aperture and the fact that you're just have an alt-az mount, you start to get limited. And I'll show some examples a little bit later of targets that, you could probably, an experienced imager can look at that and go, well, I could do a lot better than that. And even on these here, they look pretty good for the casual observer, but a higher end rig could have smaller stars and, could have some advantages. But for first time imagers, that they love this. It's, easy to get this, and they're just pickled pink that you can get something this nice fairly quickly. And also it's nice for people who just want to travel scope without a lot of mess, a lot of work. For example, I can go on a family trip and we could pack for the trip, and then I can just at the last minute go, oh yeah, let me throw my scope in the car and just stick it in there. Some of my other scopes with a large tripod and mount, I have to like put that in first, and then pack everything else around it. So it's kind of a major commitment to decide to bring the scope along. But like my Vespera or the Dwarf 2, it just, I can always find a little spot to put it in there at the last minute. So
Jeff?
Yes.
Could you answer a couple of questions?
Yes, certainly.
So I assume you have to charge these things up, or do they run on external batteries, or what's the arrangement for those?
They all have it kind of varies from scope to scope. I think they all have either an internal or a removable lithium battery. So yeah, you do charge them up. Although each of them that I'm familiar with have also some kind of connector on it. Could be a USB-C or maybe even a proprietary connector that you could hook up to another external battery source. And so I've done it both ways. If I want to just image something for about maybe 3 or 4 hours, I can usually just, I'm fine with the just having the thing charged up and go ahead and use it. Although sometimes I want to like really be aggressive. Like as soon as it's dark, I want to start imaging until like, half an hour before it starts to get light. And also maybe if it's kind of cold, the batteries don't last as long. So I've also done it where I've taken a big lithium power brick and hooked up a USB cable to that to also power it. So you can just hook up the extra supplemental power and you can run the thing all night long. I've also been on these multiple day star parties where getting power is a little problematic. So I take one of those big power bricks with me, and I can usually through that run the thing, like maybe 3 nights in a row, no problem.
And the images that you're showing there, is that how it outputs it? Does it pre-stretch it, or you have to process it external? And what's the format that it outputs images?
Okay, that varies from device to device, but in general, each of these things are going to give you usually a JPEG output that's already stretched and everything, that's ready to look at on your screen. And they also, some of the models, I know the Vespera, the Stellina, and also the Dwarf can give you a raw file already stacked but not yet stretched output file. Actually, the Dwarf gives you a already stacked and stretched output file, but it's in, the Dwarf gives it to you in PNG format, and the Stellina and the Vespera give it to you in a TIFF format. So that's an already stacked but not yet stretched file that you could just put into Photoshop or PixInsight or whatever image processing program you want, that can start from a already stacked file and take it from there.
I think the Vespera will also, you can like download the individual raw files.
Yeah, that's true too.
The
Vespera and the Stellina, you can actually get the individual TIFF files of each sub-exposure. And so you could then take those and process those yourself. And people who do, I have not personally done that yet, but people who do that say that you can get a better result. by doing that. And so, yeah, that is possible definitely for sure with the Stellina and the Vespera. I'm not sure about the EvScope, if they have that feature or not, so I don't want to say one way or the other. The Dwarf, though, also has that ability. Although I heard that their file format is in a little bit of flux, but currently they output their sub-exposures as TIFF files that are not yet dark compensated. And then they have another dark folder that you can take your darks and get. And one person I just interacted with today, I gave him one of my full collection of those raw files from the Dwarf 2, along with my dark library, and he verified that, yeah, the individual frames in the raw format are not yet dark adjusted, which he said was a good thing because he preferred it that way. And then he took those and added them to the darks I provided. He was able to come up with an image, so he was pleased that the Dwarf was providing that. I did hear the Dwarf may switch things around where maybe they might change their sub-exposure raw files to the FITS format, and they might make their outputted stacked file a TIFF, but I'm not 100% sure if they're going to do that. But at the moment, their individual raw files for the Dwarf 2 is in TIFF format, and their stacked and stretched ready to view image is in PNG. And
can you tell us how long the exposures were for the images that you're showing here?
Yeah, the ones I'm showing here, these were all done with the Vespera, and this is actually a pretty nice. I mean, these are like a couple hours each, and these were also processed by me. So the actual right out of the scope image won't look this good. So this was me taking the TIFF file out of the scope and then running it through the image processing program and doing various tricks and anti-noise and stuff and enhancing it.
And the one galaxy on the right, is that M33?
Yes, yeah, that's M33.
I think that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay, yeah, feel free to jump in anytime as any more come up. And for who these are not good for, they're not good, obviously, for planets because of this small aperture and short focal length. And they're not good for small planetary nebula and small galaxies. Anything really small, it just doesn't quite have the focal length to do it justice. And it's not good for people who like to modularly build up their system, kind of do their own system integration. Some people enjoy that aspect of putting together their own system and putting a lot of money into a mount, a nice mount, and then swap out the optical tubes for the target and swap out cameras. And, people who want all that flexibility, these scopes do not offer that. These scopes are all-in-one scopes that are kind of one-trick ponies for medium to large D-sky objects, and the good travel scopes, but they're not. If you're heavily into astrophotography, these are not the scope that you're not going to sell all your gear and buy one of these. You're not going to do that. Although some people might want to get one of these just to have a little convenient, fun to use travel scope. If you need to go visit some family or go somewhere or fly somewhere, and you just want to take something that it's not a big hassle to take with you. And, they are nice. I actually had a family trip back in November to the Grand Canyon in Arizona. And I took my Vespera with me. I was able to hand carry it on the plane, and took it. So they have some nice Bortle, about 1.5 skies around the rim of the Grand Canyon. So actually that picture of the Andromeda Galaxy on that previous page was taken there at the Grand Canyon. So it's nice scope for that. You can take on a plane, no problem. But these are these are not the scope for people who want to take imaging to the next level. Even my best picture of these medium to large DSO objects, there's people who could just put my image to shame with better scopes, smaller stars and everything. And, you know, we mentioned this for the questions. You know, a lot of these scopes do have the ability to have raw files, either an already stacked file ready for post-processing, or the raw sub-exposures that you could use for post-processing. So I know the magic for, I guess, most people for the Astro Imaging channel is the post-processing. So these scopes do allow you to do that with all the usual suspects, PixInsight, Affinity Photo, GIMP, Photoshop, with all the collection of different plugins that you could use with those. And as I mentioned before, I got the Vespera and also the Dwarf II. So I have both of these in my possession. I've used them both for a while. And my mode of operation is to just use the already stacked raw file that they provide and just see what I could do with that. I have not personally done getting the raw sub-exposures. The picture on the right shows my Vespera and the Dwarf II with my 10-inch Dobsonian in the background, just to kind of give you a size comparison. And one little humorous note, if you look at the Vespera, my kids played a joke on me one night and put Google eyes on my Vespera. So I got a kick out of that. So that's what you see there. And even though this is not a fair comparison because of the total integration time discrepancy, this shows a little bit about comparing the two scopes I have, the Vespera and the Dwarf II. This is the Andromeda Galaxy. The Vespera has to be in the mosaic mode to get something like the Andromeda Galaxy because it's so big. It's bigger than the native field of view. But the mosaic mode of the Vespera, it has one advantage or one kind of fringe benefit. The mechanics of how it does the mosaic, it basically, you get dithering kind of for free, kind of built into it. And so a lot of people are claiming that even if you don't need the mosaic mode because of the size of the target, some people like to use it anyway just to get a little bit cleaner image because you kind of get the dithering. But one thing you'll notice, even though there is that big discrepancy between 2.5 hours in Bortle 1.5 versus 8 minutes in Bortle 5, the stars are a lot smaller in the Vespera. That's probably a lot due to the just a little bit better optics in it, and of course the little bit bigger aperture and focal length. Also, I may be struggling some getting the focus just right with the Dwarf II, so maybe I was off by like one little notch or something.
We have one question on YouTube real quick.
Sure.
James Dugan wants to know, do you know of anybody who's working on an equatorial mount type of model?
I don't know if anybody's doing that. I'm glad you asked that because with the Dwarf II, some people have been using it in equatorial mode. There's one interesting feature with, I know with the Vespera, and I think all the others, part of the setup is you have to get it level. And then I think the rest of the go-to and everything, I think it's reliant on you being nice and level in the Alt-Az mode. But the Dwarf II, I think the way it does the initial calibration to figure out where in the sky it is, I think it doesn't really care exactly if it's level or not. And people are saying that, I've not done it myself, but people are saying you can actually get that Dwarf II on a different tripod or a different mount that actually is functioning like a wedge and actually have it equatorially pointed. And then you can run it that way. So it looks like the Dwarf II software allows you to do it equatorially. And so what that means is you can, you're still limited by what the software lets you do for a sub-exposure, but if you do a 5-hour stacking, you're not going to get some kind of crazy thing where your little rectangles are starting to rotate over time. The rectangles will be kind of right on top of each other so you don't lose all the corners. But as far as a turnkey system that's just equatorial designed from the get-go, I'm not aware of one that does that. I think right now the companies that are putting these out are kind of thinking their big opportunities is for kind of new astronomers, new people who are looking more for simplicity versus, just getting the best you can possibly get at it imaging. And equatorial is always going to be a little more complicated because you have to at least have some kind of polar aligning step. Although it would be neat if they have something that could automatically polar align. So there's something to watch if some company comes out with something like that. And this is another unfair comparison because of how long I exposed. I haven't had the Dwarf 2 quite as long, so I haven't had as many opportunities to use it for longer exposures. But this one is kind of another example of the Dwarf 2 can get something like the Horsehead, but it's not going to be quite as good as what the Vespera can do. And it's another example of the Vesperas on the left, the Dwarf 2s on the right. And so obviously this is the Orion and the Running Man.
Those aren't bad. Certainly better than my first year or two of astrophotography.
Yeah. Well, my first picture of Orion was on a totally manual mount, just using my mirrorless camera, just taking a I don't know, I forget how long it was, 15-second exposure. And it was, I could barely get any nebulosity at all. And I was actually pretty happy with that. But I have done some experiments where by playing with the gain and stuff, you can actually barely make out the trapezium. Like here, the cores are blown out in both pictures, but I blew it out so I could get the other nebulosity. But it is possible if you fiddle with the gain and sub-exposure time, and you could get the not have the core blown out so much, at least with the Vespera. Somebody did post-process for me some only like a stack of 20 from the Dwarf 2. They just did that earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday. And I could barely make out the trapezium with the Dwarf. So you could probably do quite a bit better than this image on the right, with put in the right hands, processing it and, collecting it enough time. A lot of these images or collections, you have to play around with your sub-exposure duration and your gain level. Of course, that for any astrophotography, but there's a kind of a sweet spot you can find, and it's still too early days with me for the Dwarf to figure that out. But I will be playing around with that to see if I can. You always want to get the most out of these little systems. Yeah, this is the Triangulum M33 that I took with the Vespera for about an hour integration time. And these scopes, a lot of them come with solar filters, so you can use them to look at sunspots. Of course, this is just neutral density filters, nothing fancy with hydrogen or anything. But the one on the left is from the Vaonis website. So this is just showing what their filter is capable of doing with the Stellina. The one on the right is one I actually did. Just I was working one day and I saw it was sunny, so I just grabbed my Dwarf and my solar filter, ran outside and took this and came back in. I just took a little 10-minute break and did it. So that one day there were quite a few sunspots. Of course, these two images are obviously at different days. They're probably taken 6 months apart or a year apart. But it just shows what they both can do. The Vespera also has solar filters. I do have them coming, but I haven't received them yet. So I would imagine the Vespera could do something similar to the Stellina on the left. But it is fun. I was out at my club observatory, which has a big 7-inch refractor, and one of the guys has the whole solar setup. So he was out there. We're looking at flares and sunspots on the sun. And I brought my little Dwarf 2 with me for that. And we had one little spot in the observatory where the light of the sun was coming in and shining on top of this one cardboard box over the corner. So I just put my little Dwarf 2 up there on the cardboard box and got it on the sun, and had my my little Android tablet with me and walked around the observatory showing people sunspots. So that was kind of fun. People got a kick out of seeing that. So, oh yeah, right up there on that little cardboard box, the sun coming in. You know, we're getting it live right here. This is the Pleiades. Another unfair comparison, but it just shows that you can get nebulosity with even that very inexpensive Dwarf 2, and this is only 18 minutes of integration time. The Dwarf on the left, and that's probably have kind of a best case with the Vespera on the right. And another comparison between the Dwarf 2 and the Vespera of the Rosette. But it's an unfair comparison. There's a 3 and an 8 in the minutes, but one's a 38 minutes and one's a 3.8 hours.
Oh, the Vespera's doing a real nice job, honestly.
Yeah.
The stars look great, and yeah, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I did some little tricks that people do on
yeah, but like it gives
this.
you the base good data to deal with. It looks like.
Yeah, I did the old. I mean, the same tricks y'all probably do. You separate the stars from not the stars, and I, process the nebulosity differently than the stars, and made the stars a little smaller by doing some sharpening and adding them back in. So but I did the same tricks on the Dwarf 2 on that image too. But I think I'm struggling with a little bit of focus problems in the Dwarf 2, so you might be able to get a little bit better than that. And you could definitely get better if you went longer integration time on the Dwarf 2. And I was pretty happy with my comet pictures. I did get a couple comet pictures with the Dwarf 2, but most of them I got with the Vespera. I'd like to share one little kind of usage example of the Vespera, what I would do. Back in January, as you all probably remember, the time to see the comet was right before sunrise. That had the highest altitude, like at maybe 5 in the morning or something. So what I would do in January, I did this like 4 or 5 times. Whenever there was a clear forecast, or like 5 in the morning or something, I would set my alarm, no matter what day it was, to like 4 in the morning. I would wake up, make a quick cup of coffee, throw my Vespera in my car, and I would drive about 45 minutes away to a dark spot I knew. I would set my scope up, and as you mentioned in the little talk before, or the chat before this, if your scope only tracks the stars, you have to limit your exposure, pretty short. So this one was just a 5-minute exposure. And you can see the core of the comet starting to elongate a little bit at 5 minutes, but it's not that bad. So this is at 5 minutes. And at a Bortle 3.5 location on January 21st, and you could see all the different features of the comet everybody's trying to get. The ion tail, the dust tail, and a little bit of the anti-tail. So this was probably my best comet picture. I was kind of proud of. And I have others that, later in January, where you see the ion tail starting to rotate a little bit, and about maybe couple weeks later, it was coinciding with the dust tail, So it was fun to take that over multiple days. And then we had as soon as, I guess the position the comet was such that you could see it in the evening instead of the morning, we had a whole stretch of bad weather where I live. And so there was, a while before you can see it again. But most of my pictures here were back in January. So this was one case where these little robotic scopes came in pretty handy, since they're so easy just to throw in your car, go somewhere, really fast setup, take a quick short exposure, and then throw it back in the car and drive back home. So I would do that, come back home, and then have breakfast, and then go to work. And here's some other ones with the Vespera. I haven't done a lot of these Galaxy ones yet with the Dwarf 2, but that just shows kind of what you can do with the Vespera for these kind of medium-sized galaxies. Once you get really small ones, it struggles for the real small ones. And here's like M74 and M81, M82 with the Vespera. And I haven't done a whole lot of these nebula pictures with the Vespera, just because I know I can do a better job once I get my dual band filter in. But it's I got the Kickstarter version of the Vespera kind of loaded with all the accessories, but Vaonis has not yet been able to deliver all those accessories for those Kickstarter orders yet. So I'm still waiting on that. They say I should hopefully get it in April or May. So another maybe 2 or 3 months, I'll get the rest of the accessories. And will definitely, when the season's right, I'm definitely going to return to all these targets and try them again with the dual band filter in place. Of course, with the stuff like this, you don't use the filters anyway. So the trick to galaxies is just going somewhere as dark as you can and going for as long as you can. And these are kind of some examples here are what a bigger custom rig with more focal length, you could do a better job on these. I've seen pictures of that Fireworks Galaxy by somebody with their own kind of high-end custom rig that, really tiny stars and spiral arms, a lot more, distinct. And so it's kind of like those Vespera pictures in the Dwarf 2. The Vespera is better than the Dwarf 2, although it costs a lot more. A custom rig can be a lot better than the Vespera, for the kind of in the same way. So it kind of puts stuff in perspective. And so my kind of thoughts on this, and then we can open it back up for more questions, is, for me, this is kind of my thinking process. Is the first year I'm having this, and this is part of the reason why I don't have all the filters and stuff yet, but I'm going to kind of go through the whole year and capture all the medium to large D-sky objects. As you know, different things are up, different seasons. So you kind of got to go a whole year to kind of be able to get everything. And then year 2 out, looking forward to kind of redoing everything, with everything I learned from year 1, and using filters where appropriate. Some things it's not appropriate to use filters, but there's other stuff it is. And maybe go to dark sites more, maybe go longer more, maybe use that mosaic mode more, and I also want to get into using the individual raw files and run them through all the image process, the stacking software packages that I'm sure a lot of people on this channel use, for their stuff. So, it's I want to learn that kind of workflow, and to see if I can, that can produce even better stuff. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. That's kind of more, what I've used, kind of my year 2 stuff. And then there could come to a time where I've done all those medium-sized, large-sized stuff and want to get more into the smaller stuff. And so in that case, I might put together my own rig for that. I do have a pretty nice refractor already. I do not have a nice equatorial mount for it. So, I'm going to be researching that to see if I want to pick up which equatorial mount, and also get a nice appropriate camera. I've decided if I want to go mono or color, but you know, so I'll be kind of thinking through that. But so that's kind of my 3-year plan, you know, associated with these robotic scopes. But I always feel now that I have a place in my arsenal for the robotic scopes for kind of a travel scope, you know, something even if I did get a nice custom rig I put together myself, I could still see a place for something small and light. I could throw in my car and go on a family trip or something, and or just go anywhere. I just don't want the hassle of taking a larger setup. And one last thing I want to show you on the last slide. It's a little something that only the Dwarf 2 can do. You can take a daytime nature shot. So I have a little bird feeder. I actually bought this for the Dwarf 2. So so you can take video. So I took this, the bird feeder is on a little pulley right outside of my 2nd floor kitchen window. And so I could open up my kitchen window and have the little Dwarf 2 on a like a little bread box and aim it out the window. And so that's how I took this. And so I was actually at a different window with my tablet, you know, controlling the camera and starting and stopping the video. And the birds didn't see me there, but and the little camera was over, you know, pointing out this other window with nobody there. So the birds were totally, they didn't mind that camera at all. And I think I was about maybe 17, maybe about 20, 25 feet away from the birds when this was taken. So this is a little fun thing to do with the Dwarf 2. You can do stuff like this. And I could do stuff like this also with my refractor and put my mirrorless camera on it too, you know, but that's just a bigger, heavier setup. I've actually done that, some nature photography with that. I put some extension tubes so I can focus closer, but it's just a little bit of a beast with the heavy tripod and the refractor and the extension tubes and the camera. That Dwarf 2 is just so easy to plop up there and use. So there is a little bit of a kind of a fun factor of using these scopes. But anyway, so that's that concludes my talk. So I'll be happy to answer any questions either from the Astro Imaging group, or they can relay questions from the YouTube chat.
One question in the chat from Gary Brown is, so how do the images that you see come up live stacked on like a tablet compare to the ones that you've processed?
Okay, with the image that you process, you could do a lot better with those once you come up live. Although for the Vespera and also the EvScope, they do some auto stretching already. So so for certain things, it does a pretty good job, you know. But for other things, it's not quite so good. And you could do a much better job once you post-processed even the stacked image yourself. All the ones I showed in this talk were all ones that I did post-process some myself, with the exception of the sunspot pictures. The one I took of that will just right out of the camera. I can say though that the Dwarf 2 does have a little histogram on it where you could drag little points up and down to it's kind of like in some of these image processing programs, they have the curves thing where you can drag little parts up and down. It does have that on the screen. And so when I have, for example, used the Dwarf 2 on things like the Orion Nebula, I would once the stack starts coming in for the live view, you know, it looks kind of washed out and grainy. I would actually, you know, you could move those little points up and down and histogram just right to reduce a lot of the, you know, kind of readjust that black point and make the image look a lot better just for your live enjoyment. So that's a nice feature on the Dwarf 2. I think people who are in the EAA do that a lot with the Sharp Cap program. I don't have a lot of experience in that, but I know they use that a lot for their live enjoyment when they're doing their EAA. So the Dwarf 2 has something, I think it's more crude than the Sharp Cap version, but you can do it there. And I can also say on the Dwarf 2, the software is not quite as slick as on the Vespera or the Stellina, and I would presume the EvScope. I've heard people there say they really like the software there. So I think that's part of what you're paying for stuff like the EvScope and the Vespera Stellina is a little bit more advanced software. The Dwarf 2 is a little bit more of a work in progress. I've heard, I'm not 100% sure, but I heard that the Dwarf 2 is basically a bunch of grad students in China like masterminded the thing, and they were like, I don't quite know the things, what's going on, but they obviously have maybe through their university some tie-in with some big Chinese manufacturing company that can crank these things out. But I know that they are still working on the software. Of course, the EvScope and the Stellina and the Vespera, they produce new updates on that software as well, but those scopes have been out a while, and so the software is a little bit more mature. The
Jeff, you can stop sharing your screen if you'd like.
Okay. Yes, I just want to say that the Dwarf 2 software is a little bit more kind of a little rougher on the edges, but they are claiming that they're going to add some new features. There's a few usability issues that we're hopeful they will correct. I think the iOS version for those who like iPhones and iPads, that's not quite ready yet. It's kind of a beta release is out. But I think by the time that they get the bulk of the pre-orders shipped, I think they'll have that iOS version released.
So right now it's an Android app?
Yeah, right now the Android app has all the functionality. The iOS app is kind of in beta. They don't have all the functionality in the iOS app at this particular moment. That could change next week or in 2 weeks or a month or something. But as of right now, I know the people who have been fortunate enough to get the Dwarf 2 in their hands, who are Apple people, are a little frustrated because they can't quite do everything with it yet.
Do they have a wireless connection for a laptop?
I don't think so. There might be a way to get
a use like a Android app emulator. Like
there might be some ways to kind of trick it like that. But all of these scopes are designed to use a mobile connected app.
I was going to do that with the ASI Air. Use an emulator app on my computer to connect to it.
Yeah, so if you're tech savvy enough to run an emulator that can emulate like an Android or a Apple thing, then you can certainly do it that way. But these things, they're not making it like PC or app like Apple MacBook Pro friendly. Although I do know that there are a couple exceptions for the Vespera. The way you get the images off of the Vespera is the way I do it, I use my PC, and first I connect to the Vespera Wi-Fi, and then I just open up my file manager window and I type in like FTP I think it's 127.0.0.1 or something, and you just connect to it and as an FTP client, and you just get into the user folder and just drag your images over. And so that's how you get your images off the Vespera. There's no removable SD card in the Vespera. The Stellina, there is a little removable SD card you can pull out and stick in your SD card reader. And in the Dwarf 2, there's a little micro SD card. So you could remove that and stick it in another little larger thing, and then stick it in your USB drive in your computer. Also on the Dwarf 2, you can get into the app, and there's a little software mode you can put it in where if you hook up the USB cable between the Dwarf 2 and your laptop, you can have it show up as a drive. And then without having to pull out that little bitty micro SD card, was a little bit hard to pull out. You could just use your USB-C cable and just connect your have it show up as a drive, and then just drag the files off.
Okay.
And I only have personal knowledge about how the EvScope works for getting files off.
Okay, Jeff, is there somewhere where you post information about these devices where someone might be able to contact you or view your experience?
I do have a YouTube channel. I don't have a whole lot of videos on it, but that's one place. I'm active on cloudy nights, so you can find me there. If you search for like a Vespera thread or a Dwarf 2 thread, if you post a question there, I'll probably see it and I can answer it. I'm also on Facebook. There are some users groups for both the Dwarf 2 and also the Vespera, and I'm usually kind of monitor those, so you can also find me there.
Well, that's excellent. Listen, thank you very much for presenting. I'm certain we've all been curious about these devices, and no doubt they're going to get better as the time goes by and produce more quality images. And you're kind of there in the beginning. So,
yeah, I'm definitely an early adopter. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, it looks really cool. I'm waiting for version 3 to come out." But I figured, I'm not getting any younger, so I might as well just enjoy it a little bit. And of course, I'm earlier on the curve, so to speak, as far as being imaging. I'm right at the beginning, so I'm just thrilled with them right now. Maybe some of you all would be a little bit unimpressed, since you're probably maybe doing great things with your existing rigs. But for me, I think it's really, really neat, and I'm enjoying it.
no more questions on YouTube, so I think we're about ready to wrap it up. So for all of you out in YouTube land, be sure to come back next week. We're going to have, I think, 5 individuals present their way of processing the surfboard, or NGC 55, that Terry so generously posted. And again, even if you haven't submitted them, if you want to download Terry's data or any data from any of our processing challenges over the past couple of years, they're always available, and there's a variety of them. So I guess that's all. We're all set for tonight. If we're ready to sign off. Terry, are you there?
I am.